In the autumn of 1944, a deceptive calm settled over the Ardennes forest, a rugged, heavily wooded region of rolling hills and deep valleys spanning parts of Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. To the Allied High Command, this was a ghost front, a quiet sector deemed unsuitable for major offensive operations, and therefore an ideal place for new, untested American divisions to get their first taste of the line, or for blooded, veteran units to rest and refit. The war, it was widely believed, was all but won. Paris had been liberated in August, and the Allied armies had surged across France in a breathtaking advance. Now, poised along Germany's western frontier, they were building up strength for the final push across the Rhine and into the heart of the Reich. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower was preparing for a great winter offensive, confident that the German Wehrmacht was a broken force, capable only of fighting a stubborn but ultimately hopeless defense. This pervasive optimism, born of spectacular success, would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation. While the Allies rested, an entirely different reality was taking shape in the shadows of the Reich. In the fevered mind of Adolf Hitler, the war was far from over. He was planning one last, monumental gamble, a counter-offensive of such audacity and scale that it would, he believed, shatter the Western Alliance and change the entire course of the war. The plan was codenamed Wacht am Rhein, or Watch on the Rhine, a deliberately innocuous name designed to suggest a defensive posture. Its true name was more fitting: the Ardennes Offensive. The concept was classic Hitler, a throwback to the glory days of 1940, when his panzer divisions had sliced through this very same terrain, outflanking the Maginot Line and bringing France to its knees in 6 weeks. He envisioned a surprise attack, a thunderous blow delivered through the weak American lines in the Ardennes. The objective was breathtakingly ambitious: to break through the Allied front, cross the Meuse River, and then wheel northwest to capture the vital port of Antwerp. By seizing Antwerp, Hitler would cut off the supply lines of the British 21st Army Group and the American 1st and 9th Armies, trapping nearly 1 million Allied soldiers in a giant pocket. He believed such a devastating defeat would not only cripple the Allied war effort, but also sow discord between the British and Americans, leading to a political crisis and a negotiated peace in the West. This would free Germany to turn its full might against the Soviet Union in the East. It was a desperate plan, born of a refusal to accept the reality of impending defeat, but it was meticulously crafted and backed by the last significant reserves of the Third Reich. To lead this great endeavor, Hitler assembled 3 armies. On the northern flank, tasked with the main effort of racing to Antwerp, was the newly formed 6th Panzer Army, commanded by the formidable Waffen-SS General Sepp Dietrich, a man known for his brutality and unwavering loyalty to Hitler. In the center, with the objective of seizing crucial road junctions and protecting Dietrich's flank, was the 5th Panzer Army, led by the brilliant and highly skilled Panzer General Hasso von Manteuffel. To the south, the 7th Army, composed mainly of infantry divisions under General Erich Brandenberger, was tasked with protecting the southern flank of the entire offensive. In total, Hitler had secretly amassed nearly 500,000 men and over 1,500 tanks and assault guns. He had stripped the eastern front of its best panzer divisions, pulling units like the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, both hardened and fanatical formations. To ensure the attack's success, extreme secrecy was maintained. All troop movements were conducted under the cover of darkness. Radio silence was absolute. Soldiers were not told of their destination until the final hours. Hitler even employed a special commando unit, Panzer Brigade 150, led by the infamous Otto Skorzeny. Its men were dressed in American uniforms and equipped with captured American jeeps and tanks. Their mission, codenamed Operation Greif, was to infiltrate enemy lines ahead of the main advance, sow confusion, seize key bridges over the Meuse River, and generally create chaos. On the other side of the line, the American First Army, commanded by General Courtney Hodges, held a front of over 80 miles. The divisions garrisoning the Ardennes were a mixed bag. The 28th Keystone Infantry Division had been mauled in the brutal fighting in the Hurtgen Forest and was in the Ardennes to absorb replacements and retrain. The 106th Golden Lions Infantry Division was a green unit, having only arrived on the front a few days prior. The 4th Ivy Infantry Division was also recuperating after heavy combat. These units were stretched dangerously thin, holding frontages far wider than doctrine recommended. Allied intelligence had picked up signs of a German build-up, but the reports were dismissed or misinterpreted. The prevailing assumption was that the Germans were incapable of launching a major offensive. Any attack, it was thought, would be a limited, spoiling action. The weather, too, conspired against the Allies. A thick, persistent fog and low cloud cover blanketed the region, grounding the all-powerful Allied air forces, which would have easily spotted the massive German build-up. The stage was set for a perfect storm. In the frigid pre-dawn darkness of December 16th, 1944, the storm broke. At 5:30 a.m., along an 80-mile front, 2,000 German artillery pieces and rocket launchers erupted in a furious bombardment, tearing into the American positions. The ground shook, and the sky was lit by the flashes of countless explosions. Shells rained down on command posts, communication lines, and artillery batteries, isolating the front-line troops. Then, under the eerie light of massive searchlights bouncing off the low clouds, the German infantry advanced, a grey tide of spectres emerging from the mist-shrouded forests. They swarmed the American outposts, overwhelming the shocked and outnumbered defenders. Behind them came the panzers, their engines roaring, their tracks churning the frozen earth. The initial shock for the Americans was total. Communications were severed almost instantly. Units were cut off and surrounded. The sheer weight of the German assault shattered the thin American line in multiple places. In the center, von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army achieved a stunning breakthrough against the 106th and 28th Infantry Divisions. On the Schnee-Eifel, a wooded ridge that formed a key part of the American front, 2 entire regiments of the Green 106th Division, the 422nd and 423rd, were encircled within 2 days, cut off, disorganized, and facing an overwhelming enemy force. They fought on as long as they could. But by December 19th, with ammunition exhausted and no hope of relief, some 8,000 men were forced to surrender. It was the largest mass surrender of American troops in the European theater, a disaster comparable to the fall of Bataan. In the north, however, the German plan began to unravel almost from the start. Sepp Dietrich's 6th Panzer Army, the main effort, slammed into a wall of unexpectedly stubborn resistance. The primary axis of his advance led through a series of narrow, winding roads on a high plateau, known as the Elsenborn Ridge. Here, the American 99th Checkerboard Infantry Division, another inexperienced unit, and the veteran 2nd Indian Head Infantry Division, though initially pushed back, refused to break. They fell back to a series of well-prepared defensive positions on the ridge itself and fought with a ferocity that stunned the Germans. The fighting for Elsenborn Ridge was brutal and relentless. The SS Panzer divisions threw themselves against the American lines again and again, only to be repulsed by a storm of artillery and machine gun fire. The determined stand on Elsenborn Ridge created a northern shoulder to the German penetration, a firm barrier that blocked the most direct route to the Meuse River and Antwerp. Dietrich was forced to divert his panzer spearheads to the south onto roads that were already congested and unsuitable for a rapid armoured advance. This delay was the first critical failure of the German offensive. The spearhead of Dietrich's attack was a powerful battle group, Kampfgruppe Piper, commanded by the ruthless 29-year-old Waffen-SS officer Joachim Piper. His unit, composed of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment and supporting infantry and engineers, was a formidable force, equipped with the newest Tiger II heavy tanks. Piper's orders were to bypass resistance and drive relentlessly for the Meuse bridges. He initially made good progress, smashing through the remnants of the American defenses and creating a deep salient. But his path was marked by brutality. On December 17th, near the crossroads of Bolge, his men captured over 100 American soldiers from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion. The prisoners were herded into a field, and then, for reasons that have never been fully explained, the SS troopers opened fire with machine guns and pistols. Over 80 Americans were massacred in the cold snow. News of the Malmedy massacre spread like wildfire among the American troops. It extinguished any notion of a gentleman's war and instilled a grim determination to fight to the death. No prisoners became an unspoken rule in many units. Piper's advance, however, soon bogged down. He was plagued by logistical problems. The German plan had gambled on capturing American fuel dumps to keep the panzers moving, but the retreating Americans, often at the last minute, managed to blow up their supply depots. Piper's tanks consumed enormous amounts of fuel, and the supply columns struggled to keep up on the congested, shell-pocked roads. He also faced determined resistance. At the small town of Stavelot, his men were held up for a crucial period by a small American force. At Stoumont, his advance was finally halted by elements of the 30th Infantry Division and the 82nd Airborne Division, which had been rushed to the area. Blocked, out of fuel, and under constant attack from the air once the weather cleared, Piper was trapped in the village of La Glaise. After a week of desperate fighting, he was ordered to break out. On Christmas Eve, he abandoned his remaining vehicles, including his precious Tiger II tanks, and led his surviving 800 men on a long, arduous march back to the German lines. The most powerful armoured spearhead of the 6th Panzer Army had been blunted and effectively destroyed. While Dietrich was being stymied in the north, von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army continued to make alarming progress in the centre. After shattering the 106th and 28th Divisions, his forces drove deep into the Ardennes, creating the bulge in the Allied lines that gave the battle its name. Two key objectives lay in his path: the road junctions of Saint-Vith and, more importantly, Bastogne. Saint-Vith, a vital crossroads, was defended by a hodgepodge of American units, including remnants of the 7th Armored Division, under the command of General Bruce C. Clark. For 6 crucial days, they held Saint-Vith against overwhelming odds, throwing the German timetable into disarray and forcing von Manteuffel to divert significant forces to reduce the town. The defense of Saint-Vith was a classic holding action, buying precious time for the Allies to rush reinforcements to the front. The most critical point in the entire Ardennes, however, was Bastogne. A town of modest size, it was the hub of a network of 7 major roads, controlling all movement in the region. Whoever held Bastogne controlled the advance. As the German panzers raced towards the town, the Allied High Command made one of the most crucial decisions of the battle. On the evening of December 17th, General Eisenhower ordered the Strategic Reserve, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, to the front. The 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, famous for their role in Normandy, were enjoying a well-earned rest in Mourmelon, France. The order came down: move to Bastogne immediately. In a frantic, non-stop truck convoy, the entire division was rushed north. They arrived in Bastogne on December 19th, just hours before the German 2nd Panzer Division and Panzerlehr Division closed the ring around the town. Along with elements of the 10th Armored Division, the paratroopers prepared for a siege. The situation for the defenders of Bastogne was grim. They were surrounded, outnumbered 5-1, and desperately short of ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The winter weather was brutal, with temperatures plummeting and snow falling heavily. The Germans launched relentless attacks from all sides, probing for a weakness in the perimeter. The acting commander of the 101st, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, established his headquarters in the town's barracks. On December 22nd, the German commander sent 2 officers under a flag of truce with a written demand for the honorable surrender of the town. The note warned that if the demand was refused, the town would be annihilated by German artillery. When the demand was brought to McAuliffe, he was initially perplexed. After a moment's consideration, he gave a reply that would echo through history, a perfect encapsulation of the American fighting spirit. He sent a typed message back to the Germans. It contained a single word: nuts. The reply baffled the German officers, who had to have its meaning explained to them, but for the besieged defenders of Bastogne, it was an electrifying jolt of defiance. Morale soared. The battered bastards of the bastion of Bastogne, as they called themselves, would hold. While the men in Bastogne fought for their lives, the Allied High Command was recovering from its initial shock. On December 19th, Eisenhower convened a meeting of his senior commanders at a damp, cold barracks in Verdun. The mood was somber. General George S. Patton, Jr., commander of the American Third Army, which was then preparing for an offensive into Germany's Saar region, was characteristically aggressive. Before the meeting, he had already ordered his staff to prepare 3 contingency plans for turning his army 90 degrees to the north and attacking into the flank of the German Bulge. When Eisenhower asked how long it would take to launch a counterattack, Patton stunned the room by announcing he could attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. It was a bold, almost unbelievable claim, but Eisenhower trusted him. "George," he said, "you've got it." Patton's promise set in motion one of the most remarkable logistical feats of the war. The Third Army disengaged from its front, turned, and began a massive, high-speed movement north over icy roads, a complex and difficult maneuver even in ideal conditions. The fate of Bastogne, and perhaps the entire battle, now hinged on 2 factors: Patton's ability to reach the town and a break in the weather. For days, the thick cloud cover had protected the German columns from Allied air power, but on December 23rd, the skies began to clear. It was a Christmas miracle for the besieged paratroopers and a death sentence for the Germans. The Allied air forces were unleashed. C-47 transport planes flew in a constant stream over Bastogne, dropping desperately needed supplies by parachute. More importantly, hundreds of P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs swarmed over the Ardennes, hunting for German tanks and trucks. The roads became a slaughterhouse. German columns were strafed and bombed mercilessly. The panzers, so formidable on the attack, were now exposed and vulnerable. Allied air supremacy reasserted itself with a vengeance, halting the German advance in its tracks. On the ground, Patton's Third Army was closing in. The lead element was the 4th Armored Division, commanded by General Hugh Gaffey. They fought their way north against determined German resistance. On the day after Christmas, December 26th, a column of Sherman tanks from the 4th Armored's 37th Tank Battalion, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, broke through the German lines and linked up with the defenders of Bastogne. The siege was broken. The defense of Bastogne had been a pivotal moment. It had held up the entire German 5th Panzer Army, disrupted its timetable, and served as an anchor around which the Allied counterattack could pivot. With the relief of Bastogne, the tide of the battle had definitively turned. The German offensive had run out of steam. The panzer divisions were short on fuel, men, and ammunition. They had failed to cross the Meuse, let alone reach Antwerp. Hitler's great gamble had failed. Now the Germans were on the defensive, desperately trying to hold on to the salient they had created, while the Allies prepared to squeeze it from both sides. The Allied counteroffensive was a two-pronged affair. In the south, Patton's Third Army continued its relentless push northward, aiming to cut off the Bulge at its base. In the north, command of the American 1st and 9th Armies had been temporarily transferred to British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, a decision by Eisenhower that, while militarily sound, caused considerable friction with the American generals, particularly the proud and sensitive Omar Bradley. Montgomery, methodical and cautious as ever, orchestrated a slow, grinding attack southward. The fighting was now a brutal war of attrition, fought in deep snow and sub-zero temperatures. The forests of the Ardennes became a frozen hell of shell bursts and machine gun fire. Frostbite and trench foot caused as many casualties as enemy action. The Germans, trapped in the narrowing salient, fought with the courage of desperation. Hitler refused to allow a withdrawal, ordering his generals to stand and fight. He even launched a secondary offensive on New Year's Day, Operation Nordwind, in the Alsace-Lorraine region to the south, hoping to draw American forces away from the Ardennes. But this, too, was a failure, a final, futile gesture. Throughout early January, the American forces from the south and the combined British and American forces from the north slowly closed the pincers. On January 16, 1945, patrols from the 1st and 3rd Armies met at the town of Uffalise, officially closing the Bulge. Although many German units managed to escape the trap, they were forced to abandon the bulk of their heavy equipment. The Battle of the Bulge was over. The cost of the 6-week battle was horrific. The United States suffered over 81,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed, making it the single bloodiest battle in American history. The British suffered around 1,400 casualties. The German losses were even more catastrophic, with estimates ranging from 80,000 to 100,000 casualties. More importantly, they lost over 600 irreplaceable tanks and assault guns, and the Luftwaffe was shattered. The Ardennes offensive had consumed the last of Germany's strategic reserves. The panzer divisions, the backbone of the German army, were a spent force. There would be no more great offensives in the West. Hitler's last gamble had not only failed, but had hastened the final collapse of the Third Reich. While the Western Allies had been forced to halt their advance for 6 weeks, the battle had drawn off German forces that were desperately needed to face the impending Soviet onslaught in the east. On January 12th, the Red Army launched its massive Vistula-Oder offensive, an attack that would carry it from the gates of Warsaw to the banks of the Oder River, just 40 miles from Berlin. The Battle of the Bulge was a testament to the folly of a dictator who refused to see reality, but it was also a testament to the resilience and courage of the American soldier. Outnumbered, surprised, and fighting in appalling conditions, they had bent, but not broken. From the stubborn defenders of Elsenborn Ridge To the battered bastards of Bastogne, they had absorbed the enemy's best punch, and then, with grim determination, had risen from the canvas to deliver the knockout blow. The snow-covered forests of the Ardennes, the scene of Hitler's final, desperate hope, became instead the graveyard of his armies, and the place where the last light of the Third Reich was extinguished. The road to victory was now clear,